everyone, and welcome back to the Humperdinck Productions podcast. Today, we'll be interviewing Taylor Barton from A Just Harvest, the organization that we're partnering with to raise money to help prevent food insecurity. I'm super excited for today. It's me, Annalise, and Taylor on today. Let's get started. So, hi, how are you doing, Taylor?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So first of all, would you like to start with introducing yourself and the story to how you got involved with A Just Harvest?
Sure. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, my name is Taylor Barton, and I'm the Director of Development and Communications at A Just Harvest. So my introduction to the organization came over the summertime. I don't know if you heard, but there was this huge pandemic problem. And so I was freelancing over the summer with fundraising activities. And normally A Just Harvest runs a 5K every summer to raise money for the community kitchen and gardens and Northside Power and all of our programs. Because of the pandemic, folks could not come out and run a normal 5K. And so they pivoted it to a 5-week-long challenge for community wellness. And they were looking for a fundraiser for that. I signed on to do that. I didn't suck at it completely. And so now I am full-time. And so, I mean, the way that I found out about A Just Harvest was actually through volunteering. Before I was employed here, I was working with the Rogers Park Community Response Team to set up grocery deliveries and donations for folks in the community. And that honestly, came out of the pandemic also. So, yeah, it was good times.
Awesome. Did you go to school in the area? How did you get into doing your volunteering and all of that?
Sure, yeah. So I graduated from Columbia College in 2015. And so I studied acting, actually. So I didn't, So for my undergraduate career, I didn't, do much with activism or volunteering. But you might pick up on your recording. My coworker is opening a LaCroix. No, you're good. The kind of theater that I became interested in, though, after graduating quickly, turned into theater for social change. So a lot of feminist plays, a lot of social justice-y plays. I worked with a company called Catharsis Productions, and they do sexual assault prevention work with the military through improv and stand-up and theater. And so I did that with them for almost 4 years. And then COVID happened and I decided it was time to try something new.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds like an incredible project.
Wow. And so what does your kind of day-to-day work look like?
Sure. It's different for me every day. So my top priorities are basically cultivating the voice of A Just Harvest such that we can continue being A Just Harvest. So I work on our fundraising projects. I manage all of our development activity. So for example, we just finished up a benefit. Normally every year, A Just Harvest hosts an awards benefit to honor the community and kind of folks we've collaborated with throughout the year. Once again, we got to pivot that due to the pandemic. So, we had it completely via Zoom this year, but still managed to do a silent auction and a raffle, and selling tickets. And so it was very special, actually. But so that's one example. Event management, and also all of our social media, any communications that you see coming out of the nonprofit. Probably have had my fingers in it.
Wonderful. So for our listeners who don't really have a background in this, can you just give us a short rundown on what food insecurity means and like what it kind of looks like in our communities and what people might not know about it?
So I mean, I think when folks hear food insecurity, it's often mistaken for hunger. And those are not quite the same. Colloquially, we use them the same way, but when we talk about food insecurity, we mean people not having secure access on the regular to healthy and nutritious food. And so that's not just like if you're hangry or if you're, feeling some pangs of hunger. It's not knowing where meals and nutrition are coming from consistently. And this has been a huge problem, in our city and in our country. And I think COVID-19 has definitely shined a bigger spotlight on it. So people are more aware of it now. But it's been a problem for a long time. We're seeing now that what it looks like in our communities is shifting a little bit. So for background knowledge, a Just Harvest does a daily meal, a daily hot, nutritious meal. We had it where we would basically have a sit-down dinner. And so folks would be served by our volunteers and be able to come inside and kind of have a community experience and get a free, hot, nutritious meal. Now we are doing lunch to go every day. So we've taken on the cost of, to go containers and disposable silverware and all of that stuff. It's still hot. It's still free. We still don't require any documentation. But what we're seeing is that, the numbers are shifting in terms of folks who are requiring food on the regular, and also who is requiring that resource is changing. So, we're seeing folks now who are maybe having to make the choice between paying the rent, paying a medical bill, or eating. And that is a reality for far more people than I think, especially in, even Rogers Park and in Evanston, and, especially with the stereotype of the North Side being the safe or the well-off side of Chicago. Folks don't really always imagine that that's the case, but it is, and it lives right inside our communities. And so, that's kind of always one of our missions, is to raise awareness about that. And also emphasize the power that a community has within its own self, right? Because I think when we and like, shut me up if I'm rambling too much, because I'll talk all day about these things. But when we talk about helping a community or feeding a community, often the stereotype is we're here to fix poor people. And that is so far from what we are trying to do. We're not here to fix anybody. People do not experience food insecurity or poverty because there's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with our systems, right? There's something wrong with the larger systemic situation that allows so many people to fall through the cracks like that. So we try not to say that we're empowering people. We try to say that we are cultivating the power that already exists in them, because we didn't come in and suddenly make them powerful. Right. Yeah. So that language is super important, especially as a comms person. Yeah. And so cultivating all of that messaging is really kind of one of my biggest focuses here. But yeah, and so when we talk about what hunger looks like, it looks like people, and what food insecurity looks like, it looks like people not being held by their communities in the way that they should. And so we're very, very much about community wellness, and kind of the keeping a pulse on how not just our next door neighbor, but also everyone in our neighborhood and in our city is doing together as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that definitely makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we really found interesting about your organization, is that it's so much more than simply a kitchen that does give out, free hot meals, which is super important, but really focusing on the systemic problems that are causing that, and what can you do to build community underneath the surface level help you can give people.
Is there anything specific that you're really proud of your organization and the way that it builds community or the way you operate? You might have already covered it in this last question, but
yeah. Well, I mean, that's you actually put it perfectly, is that, we're not just about feeding a daily need. We're also feeding that hunger for community and for a sustained and long-term solution to these things that create poverty. We call ourselves a root cause organization. And that's because we're not just trying to put a Band-Aid on the situation. We're trying to put ourselves out of business, ultimately. We envision a situation where we are not central to the community because they don't need us. And so being a root cause org is something that I think all of us are very proud of. And it also, when we have that set up, we enable the community to take part in their own liberation. And that's really important to me, is that people are not just walking up to us and, taking food and leaving. They're also enabled in creating job development, in creating all kinds of economic development and advocacy work to get at these larger system errors, like we're computer. But these larger problems that are really the root cause of food insecurity. I'm proud of that.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Oh, sorry. I'm also really proud that we're a Black-led organization. Like, in 2020, there's nowhere else I would want to work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's huge.
That's so fascinating. I'm really interested in your organization, and I wanted to ask a little bit about, we've mentioned COVID-19 and how you have changed your response to that a little bit. And I was just thinking, do you have any thoughts about how COVID-19 has set back the movement for general community liberation?
Has it helped it? I mean, probably not, but you said that there's more awareness now, which is interesting.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
If there's any differences that you're seeing, people being more aware or systems failing so deeply that, it's really going to change things.
Yeah.
Just
right.
Perspective.
I mean, cross all your fingers and your toes, right? But I think I think that COVID has, kind of pulled back some of the curtain on things that always existed, problems that we had, with certainly poverty and hunger, but also with racism, also with community wellness, and all of these big issues, right? So we're seeing folks, at least in my community, I'm seeing folks prioritize that more and really, especially with things like anti-racism training or, creating mutual aid efforts. It's no longer a footnote in what companies are doing. It's a lot more of a something that we're willing to give our resources and time and space to, and that's truly what they require. So hopefully, we're going to learn from this. I'm sure you all have seen the meme and the tweet and everything that says, like, we shouldn't go back to normal. Normal wasn't working.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that that's been made pretty clear. I don't have a lot of close people in my community who disagree with that. But let's also recognize that, like, reaching across the aisle is part of what needs to happen next. Without getting too political, but so I think your question was, like, how can people help out organizations and causes like this?
Even people who want to start volunteering, because there's so many more people that know about all these issues, but it's not necessarily as straightforward with the pandemic as it might usually be. So if you have any suggestions for how people could start to do the work, that would be wonderful for our listeners.
Yeah.
Start to become educated or have that awareness, even if it's not actual work yet?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a few things I'll say about that. Step one, do the homework. Especially when we talk about these intersectional lenses and, wanting to support marginalized communities. What we're also noticing right now is a lot of white ladies like myself coming into these organizations, especially grassroots orgs, who have been doing the work for years, who have put in the energy and the resources and built a system already. And, it's not our place as white ladies to come in and A, start taking credit, B, start demanding that, any people of color like do our teaching for us, right? It's our job to I think inform ourselves before we come in. Now there's that, and there's also something that sounds completely opposite of that, which is always have a listening and a teachable spirit when it comes to it. Come in ready to be corrected and ready to learn and not feel defensive about it if you can manage it. And that's not just for, that's not just for anti-racism work. That's for, I think, any organizing, and especially when we talk about social justice and nonprofits. So those are really good steps in terms of wanting to get involved. Once you have approached these issues with a teachable spirit and tried to do some of that Googling your own self, I think fundraising, honestly, that's not just because I'm a development person. This is something that all of these organizations have in common. Every single nonprofit that I've ever encountered, they need the funds. They need the funds now more than ever. The way that we at A Just Harvest have shifted to deal with the pandemic has a lot to do with labor now needing to be paid. When we could have volunteers helping serve meals every day or get those groceries out to folks who need them, our staff has had to take a lot of that on, which means our payroll has had to take a lot of that on. We lost the funding from the gardening programming that we would have with after school, kids in the local Chicago public schools and private schools and universities. We had lots of programming with them where we were teaching how to grow and harvest, one's own food and everything. And we don't have that now. It's not safe. But we continue to maintain the gardens, the greenhouse, the hoop house, the kitchens, taking on new safety requirements. And I know that every organization's had to do this, where we're buying PPE now. We're having to install a new sink so that we can have more hand washing opportunities. Like it's a huge adjustment and it's a huge cost. And so there are a million ways that people can fundraise. It doesn't have to be in connection to an actual official fundraiser, quote unquote, that an organization is doing. If you want to gather money on Facebook, there's a button where you can do that now. If you are really into jogging, like you can do a peer-to-peer fundraiser and say for every mile I run, give me $5, that kind of thing. There's a lot of creativity that I think we need from our community right now. And we need from folks like you all who are interested in figuring out new ways to help. You could do a production of Hansel and Gretel and raise money that way, for example. So yeah, all of these ideas, like we need them bad. And we appreciate them.
I think it's really exciting the way that you phrase it as fundraising rather than donating. Because I there has been so many calls for helping different organizations in the past several months with, everything that's going on in all the areas, the way that this world is failing. But it's not always possible for people to directly give. And so I think it's really exciting, the idea of fundraising. So you are still meeting that financial need, but you're also learning how to organize what is a grassroots movement, and you become part of it rather than just giving your finances, which people cannot always do. So I think that's really exciting way to phrase it, and very on par with your message of community.
Good, yeah, and thank you for framing it that way and for picking up on that, because that's absolutely, like, we don't want to collect money from folks and then be like, peace, see ya, It's super important that people are not only involved in, the system that is feeding them, but also like the system that is, feeding their neighbors, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Great. Well, that's so much good information for all of us. Thank you so much for it. Those were the last of our questions. Is there anything else that you think would be good to add before we sign off, or did you cover most of it?
Yeah, I'm racking my brains. I mean, so I think, yeah, the call for fundraising is huge, and the call for creativity, I would say, and the call for learning. Like we know that learning is self-care and is community care, and so I would just ask like anyone who's hearing this podcast and hearing your production to keep their heads up and to keep at that work, because like organizations like A Just Harvest need that spirit. We need that love of community, and we need the investment in each other. And things like the arts sustain that, right? Like that is a form of care. And so I love that you all are trying to bring that to people free of charge or with a suggested donation. And yeah, like keep being creative. It's gonna be what saves us.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. So everyone listening, the link to donate to A Just Harvest is in our Instagram bio and our Facebook page bio at Opus NU. And we'll see you next week for our next podcast.
Bye.